Yeah, we are live. And welcome to Climate Chat. Hi, I'm your host, Dan Miller. And today we're going to be revisiting a subject we spoke about a few months ago called the rebound effect or Jevons Paradox. And by the way, it might be a little loud at times. I'm speaking from my sister's apartment in Brooklyn, New York today. Um, and there's a lot of cars outside, things like that. And maybe the internet speed isn't the best either. I'm seeing a little bit jerky here. But anyway, we're going to be talking about Jevons paradox and the rebound effect, but particularly as it relates to AI and data center usage. And this is actually, I think, a more important subject than people realize. It's kind of considered an academic kind of subject, and people don't really, while they believe it, if you ask them, it's a little bit like climate change in general, where we know how bad it's going to be. If you talk to any scientist about it, they'll tell you we're on the wrong path. And even if you ask an elected leader that's fairly progressive, they'll say, oh, yes, climate change is a really serious issue, something we really have to do something about. But then we don't, and it's getting worse and worse. But one of the ways we're trying to fix the problem is by investing in, quote, green solutions. And a large set of the green solutions involved energy efficiency. Let's make the car use less energy per mile. Let's make the refrigerator, stay cool with less energy, these kinds of things. And in one area, there's been tremendous progress is in computers and data centers and AI. And we're going to talk about how much the energy efficiency of those things have improved, which is mind-boggling how much they've improved, actually. But as we see in reality, we continue to use more and more energy. And it's not like those things are not unrelated. And so I'm going to start with a little story. We're going to pretend that you're a business leader and you're going to Harvard Business School to learn how to make your company successful. And your company makes widgets, and there's a lot of other companies that make widgets, and they're all reasonably expensive. And so what you learn at Harvard Business School is that if you can figure out how to lower the cost of your widget by making your manufacturing process more efficient, and perhaps if the widget uses energy, wait, 1 second, I need to, um, uh, hold 1 second, I'm getting, there we go. I had to pause. I was getting a lot of echo there all of a sudden. So I'm sorry. So you learn that your widget uses energy, and you need to reduce the amount of energy it uses so that the cost of using your widget is even less. So you do all of these things, and you succeed in making your manufacturing more efficient. You succeed in making the widget use less energy, so the cost of using your widget is less. And you beat out the competition because you're able to cut your price in half compared to them with still a high quality widget that everyone wants. And it turns out, what's going to happen then if you do that? What does everyone expect to happen if you can do that? Well, you would expect that the shipments of your widget are going to soar. You're going to double, triple, quadruple the sale of widgets because you've cut the price and made them less expensive. Therefore, more and more people can afford your widget, and your widget can be used in many more applications because it's very low cost. Everyone understands that. No one would think that's crazy. And yet, when we do exactly the same thing in the name of energy efficiency to reduce emissions, all of a sudden people think, no, 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 no. All you've done is reduce the energy required to drive your car or to run your computer or whatever it might be. And then all of those savings that you can calculate, oh, it uses that refrigerator uses half the energy. Uh, you just count that as quote the emissions reduction. And this is done. I mean, this is done all the time. It's done maybe a third of all the clean tech investments are around energy efficiency. I'm guessing at that, but it seems to me, based on the number of companies I've reviewed, that it seems like that. So, however, it really is the same as the business school example. And when you make something cheaper, it sells more and it's used more. In fact, in many cases, when it comes to energy and when it comes to computation, both of which have, there's an insatiable appetite for both of those things. As you lower the cost, the amount increases more than the energy savings, more than the efficiency improvement. And this was first discovered by William Stanley Jevons in 1865 when he wrote a book looking at the coal situation in England, and they were making coal extraction more efficient, and the Watt steam engine made the use of coal more efficient. And of course, the expectation was, well, if you need less coal per use in a factory, the amount of coal will go down. And he was trying to figure out when are we going to run out of coal, and he realized that it was exactly the opposite. That as Jevons Paradox says, the more efficiently you use a resource, the more that resource is used in total. And in fact, that issue is why we have climate change today. Before, coal was very inefficient, expensive to use. We figured out how to extract it more efficiently and how to use it more efficiently. That made its costs go down so much that we started using it in enormous, enormous quantities. And the same is true for oil, and the same is for natural gas. All of these things that improve the efficiency of these energy sources meant we can grow them. And that's what's happening today. So even with renewable energy dropping in price tremendously, it still is, and the amount of renewable energy rising rapidly, as the cost goes down, we want to use more and more of it. So far, on a net global basis, even though renewable energy has grown tremendously, all of it has gone to supplying new energy demand as opposed to switching away from fossil fuels. Now, you could argue we would have used more fossil fuels if we didn't have renewable energy, and that might be true. But it's from the climate point of view, it doesn't care. We're at record high emissions today, and that's a big problem. So let's talk now. That's the background. Let's now talk about AI. So if you take a look at, I'm going to share picture here. Here we go. I hope you're seeing, I don't know, is that the title screen you're seeing? That's the wrong one. Let's try this again. Share, pick this picture here. Share. This is very strange. Stacey, what are you seeing right now?
I see a sloped upward line,
Oh, you
same thing
do?
that you had on
Okay.
previously.
Okay, good. I'm glad you see it because I'm not seeing it, but
Oh, yeah. So it's
I will get to see it. Here it is. All right, I
computations
see
per
it now
kilowatt hour.
too. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So this is an amazing graph, really incredible. What this says is since about 1946 or so, when the ENIAC, the first electronic computer, was developed, and it used a certain amount of kilowatt hours to do one operation. And that has improved tremendously over the years to today. You can extend that line up and hit around 2020. If you do that, you will see that the energy efficiency of computing has improved by a factor of 10 trillion. I'm going to say that again, a factor of 10 trillion. In other words, computers today, and these are not even the fastest, these are like, laptops and things, can the amount of operations it can do for a kilowatt hour is 1/10 I'm sorry, the energy used to do a single operation is 1/10 trillionth as much as it was back then. You say, well, the ENIAC, that was, a pretty crude computer, so of course it used a lot of energy. No, this improvement, you'll see the line is a very steady line. That's a logarithmic chart. So each line is an order of magnitude. Each line, the amount of energy is dropping by 90%. So every 6 years, computing uses 90% less energy for a single operation than the computers from 6 years earlier. And this is not like just because it was 1945. You'll see the line is very steadily improving all the way up until today. And so, and yet, what has happened in terms of total energy use for computers, data centers, and AI in this time frame? It has done nothing but go up. And it is going up very rapidly. You can look at different studies, but if you kind of get the general feel for what they all say, they're saying that the amount of energy for computing goes up at 10 to 20% per year, which is that's a lot. And so I think that's a factor of 3 times more every decade or something. And the problem is with AI, it's accelerating even faster now. And there is an expectation that while AI and data centers in the United States maybe are using sort of in the range of 4% of all energy in the United States today, it's expected to go up to something like 20% of all energy in 2030, which is just 6 years from now. Actually, more like 5 years from now. So this is a very, very serious problem. And the reason I've been harping on this is because during Climate Week in September, I went to a seminar at Columbia University on exactly this subject, on AI sustainability. And I was looking forward to hearing these researchers were going to address the problem of AI energy. And they all said it's a really big problem. They said that there are coal plants that were scheduled to shut down that aren't shutting down because data centers are using so much energy, even though they're using renewable energy. They're taking all the renewable energy for themselves. And that's why the coal plants can't shut down, is because the growth of total energy use is so high that the renewables can't keep up yet. And so I'm looking forward to hearing their solution. 100% of the solutions they offered were improving the energy efficiency of computation. So, of course, I asked the question at the end. I said, there's Jevons Paradox, there's the Rebound Effect. And that says the more efficiently you use a resource, the more it's going to be used. So even though you're saving energy per operation, the total number of operations are going to go up far faster than that. And their answer was, our focus is just on improving the per operation amount of energy. If people use more operations, that's not our department, which is a pretty sad answer, actually. So I started looking into it, found this graph showing, it's going up at such an incredible rate that you can't argue that energy efficiency is not a thing in computing. It is. It's getting, again, dropping 90% of energy every 6 years, which is crazy, crazy. So now you say, well, why is that? Why does total energy go up? And I think a best way to show this off is to look at an EV. Oh, not an EV, a gas car that with improved mileage. Like you're going to a Prius, let's say. A Prius can get, let's say 40 or 50 miles per gallon instead of a typical car that's 25. So I'm going to stop sharing on this one and share here. And I still don't see it, but I will pop it up myself manually.
I see a, a
Car, car,
car power
and all
plant.
this stuff going on. Right.
Yeah.
So this is really a great way to look at the rebound effect. I really like this picture because when it shows the car and the pump, and it shows less energy. So less energy means you'll use less, you'll take less gallons to fill up your car. But what happens, as it shows on the bottom, when you have lower cost of running your car, you'll do two, one or both of two things. You'll purchase a larger car or a more powerful car because now it's cheaper to run that car, so you can afford an SUV instead of a Prius. Or you'll drive farther in your car. Hey, it doesn't really cost very much to drive, so I'm going to go farther. Or I used to go with two or three people. I'm going to drive to work myself now. It's more convenient for me. And so those two things are the direct rebound effects. So those are the things that everybody agrees are true, and they think those effects are small. Well, it turns out they're not really that small, but maybe 20, 30% a give back of your energy savings is from these kind of very, very direct effects. But there are also indirect effects. And this is the part where people don't want to believe it, even though it's obviously true, but it doesn't matter. People want to ignore that and only want to focus on the direct effects. But one of the things that happens if you do buy the Prius, let's say, and you really are saving, let's say, a couple $1,000s a year on fuel that you were spending otherwise, what are you doing with those savings? Well, now you can afford a trip to Spain, as it says here, or you're going to put more money in the bank and save it. And what's the bank going to do? The bank's going to lend that money out to people who want to build buildings, or to airlines that want to expand their fleet, or to a coal plant, or to a natural gas, or fossil fuel industry wants to expand production. All of those things happen rather indirectly. And then, of course, your car itself, to make it more efficient, it takes embodied energy. And people sometimes take this into account, like EVs. They used to take more energy to make than a typical car because the battery was fairly massive and that took energy to make. It's getting better now, and they're much more efficient than they used to be. But still, that's a pretty direct thing. But the other thing you do by making cars cheap is you make car culture more acceptable, right? So the question that someone else once asked, which is a good question, which would save more gas? If all cars got 100 miles a gallon, or if all cars got 1 mile per gallon? You have to stop and think about that for a while, because obviously cars that get 100 miles per gallon use far, far less gasoline to go a mile, right? They use 99% less gas than the car that gets 1 mile a gallon. But however, if a car only got 1 mile per gallon, that would cost you $3 or $4 to go a mile. And that would be so expensive that no one would drive. Taking that back to AI, now imagine, as a thought experiment, that imagine that computers got frozen in time in the mid 80s, and all computers were running on the Intel 286 chip, and it didn't get faster and didn't get more energy efficient, which was during its time thought to be an amazing chip. I mean, you could do word processing, you could do an Excel spreadsheet, you could do very, very limited graphics with it, but maybe play Wolfenstein 3D or something. But you could do things with it, but it was very limited. And then the question is, if again, that was many, many orders of magnitude ago, probably an order of 1 million times less efficient than the chips today per operation, watts per operation, watt hours per operation. And then the question is, would we be using more or less energy than we do today? And I would argue we'd be using a lot less energy today, because we wouldn't really be doing Google searches and AI and all these things. They wouldn't be cost effective to do, because the computing resource would be so expensive that you would just use it for the most important things, or simple things like word processing, where it really doesn't take a lot of computation at all. So we might have messaging on the internet, but less of the visual stuff and all of that kind of stuff. You wouldn't have an iPhone, because that couldn't possibly fit in your pocket and do all those things. So there are many examples all around us. And what I am trying to say today is that there is this delusion, just like we're deluded about climate change. Yes, we know it's serious. Yes, we know terrible things are going to happen. but we have optimism bias. We have all these human things that stop us from really believing it. And yet it's all coming true, and we're going to suffer the consequences of that. But when we're trying to address the problem by investing in clean technologies, there is a tremendous amount of investment going to something that's going to have exactly the opposite effect. Now, having said all that, energy efficiency is a good thing. It has many benefits. It helps, for example, the poor, folks who can't afford good heating, good refrigeration, air conditioning, as an example, because it would be too expensive. If you have energy efficient devices, then those people can actually afford it, which is, by the way, one reason energy usage goes up, right? So more people can afford to use it. So it has many, many positive impacts on our well-being. But what it doesn't generally do is lower emissions. Now, if it's energy related or computation related, then Jevons Paradox, where the actual amount is more than 100% rebound. In other words, if you cut energy per use by 50%, usage goes up by more than doubles, and therefore you end up using more energy. That's not true in everything. You might be able to argue cars, that cars don't have 100% rebound. Certainly for the direct effects, that's true. I think when you factor in all the other effects, it still could be true. But it's not a path to addressing climate change. So what is a path to addressing climate change? And by the way, I'm trying to keep this show kind of short so we can have a discussion, and also just to keep it shorter so more people will listen to it. And if you want the longer version, there's a link in the description to the previous show on the rebound effect and Jevons paradox, where it goes more into it. But what can we do about it? Well, we can do a few things. First of all, policies that do things like, for example, put a price on carbon by making fossil fuel use more expensive. That directly leads to energy efficiency. People figure out energy efficiency in response to the higher price. Those things don't end up being triggering Jevons paradox, because you're not making them super cheap. You're just responding to them getting more expensive, and they're getting more expensive through taxes or fees and or through policies. And you can also have policies that limit the amount that something is used, and that can also help address Jevons paradox. So policy is sort of the answer, by the way, to all of the climate issues, really. We need policies that phase out fossil fuels, for example. But the other solution, if you're a climate investor and you want to figure out where should I put my money to have an impact, you want to focus on things that eliminate fossil fuels and things that end up switching fuels. So EVs are a good thing because they allow you to use a low carbon fuel. Now, it doesn't have to be that. It might end up being coal-powered power plant, but we are phasing those out, and we still have natural gas power plant. But even if we phase them out and everyone still was driving gas cars, it wouldn't provide any benefit. But since EVs are, first of all, more efficient than gas cars, even when you compare them to running off of coal-powered electricity, they still emit less emissions per mile than a gas car does. But it does allow us to get away totally from fossil fuels. And when that happens, you haven't addressed the Jevons paradox of energy usage, but you have addressed it when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. And that's the key. You want to invest in things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions rather than just worrying about energy. But also other things that get people to use less of something rather than more of something would be good. And there may be things where you replace high consumption items with items that just don't use, even when they're used a lot and they're cheaper, they're just not as damaging to the environment. Those are also good things to do. So I'm going to actually just summarize. First of all, I didn't even start off by saying, please subscribe and like this program so more people see it. Triggers the algorithm that all of our programs, including the interviews that we usually do, uh, would just reach more people. And I'm going to, before I open up to questions, just say a little bit about upcoming programs. Some very exciting news, without having a specific date, that we're going to have Jim Hansen on here again, talking about his latest research, which could be mind-blowing, by the way. It's not out yet. Bill McKibben has agreed to come on probably early next year. And also on the 15th, we have Gabriel Point. I'm not necessarily going to say his name correctly. Pontes, Pontes. And he is the one who wrote the recent article on how the modeling of the AMOC slowdown wasn't correct. And when you correct it, you see that the slowdown occurs much faster. This is exactly what Jim Hansen said a couple of years ago in one of his write-ups. That again, people don't want to believe it, don't want whatever, but still, these are things that are happening. So those are just some near-term things, and plus we're going to have a lot of other exciting guests soon. Working and getting Kevin Anderson on again as well. We have time the right time yet. So I do want to open it up. So please subscribe. Yeah, like the program. Those are our guests. And Stacy, I'm going to welcome you back there. And I have not been following. I only have a single screen, so I have not been able to follow Clubhouse or YouTube or anything like that. But maybe you could, I don't know, if there are any questions or comments that are popping up here.
Not so far. On YouTube. I haven't been to Clubhouse in a while. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I can do that.
Yeah, I guess for me, having worked briefly in the chip industry, I know that getting compute down, releasing less heat, these are all things that they have been working on, and as you mentioned, they get better at it every year. I mean, I keep wondering, how small are we going to go? How efficient will we go? What is there a bottom, without doing a major leap onto something different? But I don't know. I
But
know what you're saying.
you approach the atomic scale, right? We're not there yet, by the
Right.
way, the atomic scale.
Right.
But well, to give you a feel for what that even means, Richard Feynman, a famous physicist, once wrote a paper that said there's a lot of room at the bottom. And they said, what would happen if we were able to encode information something like 5 atoms per bit? And you think that's crazy, but actually, a long time ago, IBM spelled out the IBM in individual atoms, and you could actually see the individual atoms. So it's possible to work at that scale. And he said, if you were able to do that, all the information of the world, which back then was like all of the major national libraries, Library of Congress in France, China, and all that kind of stuff. You took all of those things and digitized them. All of that information would fit within the head of a pin and have tremendous amount of room left over. So atoms are very small, which the point being that we have a long way before we really run into a problem here in terms of running out of room. That paper, by the way, look it up. There's a lot of room at the bottom by Richard Feynman. Kind of
There's a lot of room at the bottom. Okay. I mean, I know that this is the quest, and everyone will keep churning on this to make it smaller, faster, better, more efficient. And yes, it will. I mean, um I ran across some old computer equipment, and it's like showing my kids, like, this was a laptop, this thing, that's this thick. And it has far less, I didn't look it up, but it's like it has far less compute power than the phone that's in your pocket, you know?
Oh, by
Uh,
incredible amount.
yeah, it's mind
Maybe
blowing.
1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times different, depending how old it is.
Right. I mean, well,
Phone is
and
a faster, way, way, way faster than a Cray supercomputer.
oh,
That was the fastest computer at the time, and what was it, 70s or 80s?
That's and well, yeah, my dad, he was a math and computer science teacher, and then he worked in technology for a regional educational agency. And I remember walking into the room where they had like the Cray computer, whatever, this huge black thing. It was so hot in that room. It's just, and that is, I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, it's like a little toy that you'd get out of a gumball machine these days probably has more compute than what that enormous room full of equipment had. But we're trying to do more. You know, it's like the
And by the way, it's
resolution of the
okay that
pictures gets better. And
it's
I mean,
okay that
everything.
it improves, but we shouldn't assume we're going to lower energies. That's the problem. Is we think that's a path to lower energy usage. It's not. It's a
And we
path to
will,
more energy usage.
is it, well, more people, so because more people will have access to it. I mean, it's like, won't we, I guess we just have to have fewer people. Is that the,
No,
because
the few people that left will use all of. Look, you use. I don't know. Like, by the way, the picture I put on there, I used ChatGPT to draw the little energy gremlin. So I was using AI to create the title for for the show. You'll be able to tie your shoes with AI, right? If it's so cheap that, I mean, a Google search is like incredible amount of computation. If that actually was expensive, you'd have to pay, $5 a search or something, and very, very few people would search. You search for everything now.
yeah,
It's so embedded in our lives, we don't even notice how much computation we use. And again, it used to be 1% of all energy. Now it's like 4 or 5%. Expect it to be 20% of all energy. That's incredible. And there are ways to address it using policy. But of course, we're about to go backwards on all that for the next 4 years in the United States. We're not going to have any policies. So we're going to have anti-policies. We're going to have policies that literally promote gas cars over
yeah.
EVs. And we're going to have promoting the production of oil and gas, which, by the way, happened under Biden too, which it's not. In fact, it's going to be very hard for Trump to increase fossil fuels more than Biden did. I mean, it will be a challenge if he wants to try to do that. So anyway, there are some messages popping up here. Someone suggests making drive this. You'll agree with this, Stacy. Believe that driving should be a negative experience. Let's make cars uncomfortable, highways ugly and bumpy. Don't repair potholes. Yeah, I don't think it's going to
Except for in
happen,
the
but yeah,
bike lane.
except for the bike lane.
Except for in the bike lane or the bus lane.
And
Those
here's
are the,
something, and this is true here. They're saying if we can use Jevons Paradox to enhance the energy efficiency of negative emissions technology like DAC, and that's true. So I was back to, if you invest in things that get rid of emissions or replace emissions with non-emitting things, that actually will have a benefit as the price gets lower and you scale it up, right? That means you'll be replacing more and more and more fossil fuels with, for example, solar. But the problem, the thing that's happened to solar and wind is that the price has dropped so much that has increased the demand for energy so much that so far it hasn't gotten rid of fossil fuels. And you can easily do that if you have policies that phase out fossil fuels. Then the renewables, which are cheaper than fossil fuels, would replace them and plus add to energy supply as well. But the first thing that would happen is that they would replace the fossil fuel emissions. We're just not doing it simply because we're just not going to do any kind of thing like this.
is there,
Um,
so I had a friend once who works in tech, and he said that I'm going to be very annoyed soon, that all of the tech companies, their sustainability goals are going to get blown because of AI development and then usage by all of us. And that they're just not going to do anything about it. It's not like they're, going to put up more solar panels or whatever. We're just going to have to live with it. Is there any entity that tracks sustainability commitments and how people are doing on it? Because I feel like so many times you'll be at CES or whatever, and they go on these huge speeches or commercials even and say that they're, oh, this is carbon neutral and this is blah, 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 and whatever. And is anyone really fact checking that stuff?
Generally, no. I mean, at the high level, the International Energy Agency tracks total energy use around the world in different countries. And then
But
the
what
IPCC
Google
is
said they would
tracking
do, what Google said they would do, what Apple said they would do. Is
I'll say,
anyone
well,
watchdogging that or?
reporters, but of course they're backing off now, right? They said they're going to do that, and now they're saying, "Oh, AI energy use is increasing so fast, we can no longer meet our net zero commitment, so we're not promising that anymore." But even Google is saying that, right?
Yeah.
And that's again total lack of policy. Uh, but again, it's worse than that. Again, because this, you can also take a look at the whole globe or the country as a business or a system. Just think about that. If you can make everything so much more efficient, that everything costs less and uses less energy per thing, that whole company or country will run more efficiency. And what happens when you do that? It consumes more, not just more energy, but more mining and more everything. And that was hurting the planet. That's what's hurting climate. That's what overconsumption is all about, and the other planetary boundaries. And so by making it more and more and more efficient, um, it's leading to our ruin. Now, the thing is, back in the 1960s, when things were far less efficient, people were happier then. So it's not like we're getting happier having all this stuff around, right? We're not. In fact, we're distracted by all the information flow and we can't even keep track of it all. And now I have my phone. Now I have AI that summarizes the message. So the little first two lines, I can see what the message is about rather than reading the whole email, right? So we're using AI in all different ways, and and of course, AI itself is very dangerous, right? As the people developing it say it's a 20% chance it'll kill all of us, which normally would consider pretty high risk. And these are the people developing it, right? This is not like other people. So it's a pretty crazy situation, and it boils down. And this is what I want to get to, sort of main point that's slightly off from the actual energy efficiency thing. There's things that we know. People in clean tech know about Jevons Paradox. They know about the rebound effect. They know it. I'm on these committees. I'm talking to the people, and when I bring it up like a big thing, they go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." But no, let's not talk about it though. And so and the same thing with climate change. We know how bad it can be. In any other aspect of our life, we would be running and screaming about the risk that you'd never let. If a plane had a hundredth the chance of crashing that
Yeah.
climate has of crashing, we would be so upset about it. And yet we're able, because it interferes with our lifestyle, with our status quo that we think we'll be able to maintain, we just put it out of our mind. And climate, and again, this is not climate deniers. I'm talking about climate investors who are doing it for all the right reasons, but they just want energy efficiency to be a good thing. And they want it to lower emissions. They want that in their mind, even though if you go ask them about the Harvard Business School example of widgets, oh yeah, of course that would increase.
What
But
can we
they'll argue
rewind a
is
little
that
bit?
that
You
they
said
argue that it's not that big, by the way. That's what they
you
do. They
said
argue.
something about us not being happier, with all the we have
Mhm.
changed all these things, whatever. Is that are you a closet degrowther now or something? Or a Luddite
Um,
or
no, by the way, people say, and obviously when you're involved in climate, they tell all the time on Twitter or whatever that we need to um, lower our consumption. We need to lower our lifestyle. Kevin Anderson, by the way, is very, very direct about that. We need to make social changes, not just technological change. And I agree that that is true. One, we have to do it for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, because climate, you know, you don't get to have your status quo. Climate destroys the
yeah.
status quo. That's what it does. That's what climate does, right? Climate change destroys your status quo. It hasn't quite happened enough yet that we're paying attention to it. So it's not like you have a choice of keeping your status quo. You have choices of changing things. So, but back to your question, it's not that I don't think it's a good thing to do. I am not aware of any possible way you can get people to do that, period. And I asked Kevin that. I said, Kevin, you're right. Okay. How are you going to get that? And then everyone argues, well, we have to get everyone together. We just saw the US election. People are not going to vote for things that fix a problem in the future. It wasn't
Yeah.
even a subject of the election. Even by the progressives, didn't even offer climate change as one, they didn't offer it as an issue. And now you're telling me that, oh, by the way, climate change is such an important issue, we're going to get everyone to consume less. They won't even do the easy things that don't require you consuming less. They won't, for example, phase out fossil fuels and replace them with cheaper, cleaner, better renewable energy. It's better in every way, right? There's no downside to it. And they won't even do that because of obviously because of disinformation and lobbying and political system that's owned by the fossil fuel industry, even in the COP meetings, right? So so anyway, I'm all for it, but there's just no way it's going to happen.
We're
Period.
just,
So
yeah, we're just going to keep on
not yet.
going.
I mean, maybe when things get really bad, but it's going to happen anyway, just because climate's going to make it happen. But that's not the good way to do it.
Well, but when we say climate is going to make it happen, I am now, um, until the AMOC shuts down, until there is something that is so massive, that does cause, because the heat, we've been turning up the heat, and yes, there's been migration, but it hasn't affected the US and
Oh,
and we're
you could argue actually that even the election was influenced. Yeah, the whole thing was immigration, right? Immigration,
but
huge issue.
people are
Yes,
not
they are.
immigrating to the US because of climate.
Yes, they are. Absolutely are. In South
Who?
America and Central America, it's getting harder and harder to live. We don't notice it here because we're so wealthy and we get our food from wherever. But there's as mountain glaciers disappear and the whole town can't get water anymore to grow food. Food's getting more expensive, harder to grow. The storms and the extreme weather is destroying these places that don't have the infrastructure to rebuild. They don't have FEMA coming in to help them and things like that. We're still able to do that. It's happening today in Africa. It's happening in South America. It's happening in Central America. It wouldn't always be labeled as climate change. It'd just be, well, there's economic conditions are making it harder and people are moving. But certainly a portion of the immigration is caused by that today. And by the way, it's going to be
Yeah,
one of our upcoming guests who wrote the book on the Move, which is all about climate migration, just what we're talking about here. Yes, Eli.
yeah. There was a wave of climate migration from, I believe, Ecuador in 2020 into the U.S. So we've already seen it. It's just that it didn't like stand out high enough above everything else. Eventually, we're going to see both more of that, but also internally displaced persons when hurricanes and floods and such really hit large population centers.
Right, but
And then you could also go back to the Syrian crisis and the immigration into Europe of not that many. Most of the Assyrians went to Africa, but some went to Europe, caused a right-wing backlash. That was definitely caused by climate change. A 5-year drought in Syria. The farmers couldn't grow food anymore. They went to the cities. They had, uprisings, and it caused a big crisis there, and that caused a whole crisis in Europe. So it's happening. I mean, it is happening today. We just continue to ignore it or call it something else or just say it's like what happened. There's always been migration, so it's not something new, and so therefore we don't assign it to being from climate change.
well, I think it's more of an adaptation effect. Like we're having more people are showing up, but we don't notice, we just absorb them. Um more the storms are happening more frequently, more intensely, but we've always had them. You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
just it's the we're boiling. We're the frog and we're boiling ourselves and we're just like, yeah, okay. It's the rush we're playing it on a our climate effects are on a Russian roulette basis, they're
Okay.
happening, but it's like, well, that's Sarasota's year. Okay. They had it twice. Okay. Now where will it be the next year? Or will that place become until there's an area that people finally give up and say this is uninhabitable and that large city has to move somewhere. I don't
Okay.
see them changing or acknowledging it. It's just we're all going to keep doing the same thing.
Let's welcome Eric to Climate Chat. Hey, Eric. I guess I'm in your neck of the woods now.
Hey, yeah. So let me ask, you were saying, and I missed a couple of minutes, so if you said this again today, I apologize, but in a previous episode, you were talking about, if when I build a data center, with or without AI, if I were required to build a new, let's say, solar farm to power that, that data center,
Hmm?
then we would be in a different situation. Or
No,
what was
not
your
not no
best
no
idea?
not on that. Well, I can tell you very briefly. I mean, I do have an idea for a new policy. It doesn't exist, and by the way, not going to happen over the next 4 years for sure. But if AI data centers or data centers in general are required to build a percentage of their energy usage as new energy supply, not for their own data center, but that directly replaces fossil fuels. In other words, you have to take that amount of fossil fuel supply offline, never to be restarted. You have to buy them out, basically, right? And replace it with cheaper renewables. Then that would work because every year you'd be chipping away at the fossil fuel supply and making. And by the way, new fossil fuel, I'm sorry, new energy supply, 90% of it's from renewables because it's cheaper. It's not because there's a law that says you have to build renewables, it's just cheaper. So the new energy supply comes from renewables. But if we could actually take fossil fuels offline directly as part of the growth of data centers, then that actually, again, we're not solving the energy problem, but we would be solving the emissions problem. And that's the only thing I could think of so far that would actually solve the problem. Again,
Okay, so less good
requiring
than that.
renewables, they soak up all the renewables and all the fossil fuel power plants stay online because all the renewables are going to the data centers, not to replace fossil fuels.
Oh yeah, okay, so that would be awesome. Less good than that, but I think also good, right, would be something that says if you want to do your, let's just worry about the AI. If you want to do AI in a data center, then that data center must be powered by renewables. So and it has to be a new renewable, you can't buy out some existing renewable farm. You have to build a new one. Wouldn't that also at least reduce the problem uh, of AI and electricity, uh, not electricity, and emissions?
No, that's what's happening today. I mean, they can claim, I mean, they're not all doing it, but they can claim, um, let me see, AI energy usage. Well, just take a look at it. I mean, this is a graph of AI energy usage expected over through 2030. It's just insane growth, right? That's incredible amount of growth. And that's just the US. So, so the total US is 4,000 terawatt hours. And I think in 2030, it could be 652, could be just from AI training and inference. This is not even data center. This is just AI itself. And it's crazy. So the problem is when you do that and you make it all run on renewables, that's okay. But the renewables, again, such a high growth rate that like all of the new renewable energy you can possibly build in time would just be going to AI and none of it would be going to replacing fossil fuels, right? If we could freeze AI and not have its energy grow or data centers grow, then as renewables scale up, they're so cheap, they would inherently replace fossil fuel demand. But if energy demand is soaring, no one's going to take offline. This is not just this is happening today. Coal plants are staying online longer because of AI and data center, while natural gas is staying online longer because of this. So
And
it's already happening. Yeah,
how did you,
this
I
is.
apologize if you said this already or before I joined that, but how does this compare to, because I keep saying storage alone, like you know, I'm a digital hoarder, and so my holding on to all that stuff, it's out in the cloud and somewhere, that's taking up space and that space is powered by energy. It's like how much,
That's part of data center. That's part of data center. It's all
but
part of computing.
what were we
Part of
running
all of
at?
this improvement. It's
This is
improving
so
incredible amount. The
this is
energy efficiency of storage is improving incredibly.
but this is the demand of AI. Where are we with
This particular graph. There's other graphs that combined. They call it ICT. Uh, what's the information computing and telephony or something or it's also communications. Information computing And what's the T for? So, but it's like basically communications, internet, data centers, computing at home, and all that kind of stuff, all into one, growing at 10 to 20% a year, which is a very fast growth rate.
Well, it would be interesting to see the historical version and then the AI lumped
Well,
on top of it so you can see the
yeah.
whole picture of, well, how much, yes, of course this is growing, but what is it in the grand scheme of things?
No, I said, so the grand scheme of things, it's 4%, there's arguments about what the number is today, but it's on the range of 4% expected, well, thought or feared, I should say, that it's going to grow to 20% in just 5 or 6 years of all energy in the United States. All energy. This is like it's more than cars. I mean, it's car. I think it's 14% of energy or something like that. So we're just growing, just as we're trying to reduce our emissions by going to EVs, switching to renewables, switching all or cement plants over to green technology, doing all of that stuff. We have this brand new usage of energy that is soaring. I mean, it is soaring. It's growing at such a rapid rate that it's just mind-boggling.
Is this so when crypto came online, that was like, oh, this is such an energy
huge.
hog, mining
Yep.
crypto and whatever. But that's one of those things that I looked at. It's freaking useless and it's a scam and whatever over there, and it didn't take hold the way AI is because AI is useful to essentially everyone, So
Right.
what is the
Percentage?
what is the comparison? Is it yeah, it's like
Cars.
of all our
Cars.
compute, and will it
Expecting to be
supplant
more than
anything that we were
cars.
already doing?
Well, you can argue that. And that is part of the argument, by the way, that AI can lower, like, your iPhone, because you have a map thing, you don't make as many wrong turns as you used to when people just had paper maps, so you get there more directly. But it also makes it easier to drive, and more people can drive because they used to get lost and they wouldn't drive. So you start to factor all these things in. And when you get to the bottom line, is the more efficiently you use a resource, the more that resource is used in total. We should believe it. We shouldn't ignore it. We don't want it to be true, even though everyone agrees with Jevons Paradox for coal, right? He wrote the book on it. It's famous. We know that coal use got more efficient, and in historical fact that coal usage soared when it got cheaper. So we all agree with that. We're just not willing to believe it when it comes to anything else. We don't want to believe it when it comes to cars. We don't want to believe it when it comes to computers. We don't want to believe it when it comes to air conditioners. Because I've been on many, I do a lot of clean tech company reviews for various organizations, some on a volunteer basis and some for investment funds. And you always see these energy efficient air conditioners as being a really big breakthrough. Use less energy to keep you cool. And I say this will increase, I always point out, this, if it comes to pass, will increase energy use more than anything else. It's going to make air conditioning cheaper. Now, that makes everyone's life better. If you're in a place with a heat wave and you can run an air conditioner for far less money, this will improve your life. So don't get me wrong. It does improve people's lives. But what it doesn't do is lower emissions. And we shouldn't and I'm not saying like we used to do that. This is today in clean tech investing, is that people believe that energy efficiency will lower emissions. And again, it can in certain cases. Remember, energy and computing are insatiable. The more there is, the more we'll use, period. If you make it cheap enough, we will find more ways to use energy. If you make it cheap enough, we will find more ways to use computation and AI. It's just true. And it has been true for 80 years. And it's going to continue to be true in the future. So those things, for sure, you cannot lower energy use by making them more efficient. You just can't. And again, you say, well, they would have gone up anyway. No, they wouldn't have gone. It would have been too expensive to continue the incredible growth rate. Maybe it would have gone up with population or something like that. but it wouldn't have kept soaring the way it's the incredible rates of increase that we see today. Look at this graph. I mean, it's crazy. I should stop that. Anyway, so let's, anyone else? Do we have questions? There's some questions in the comments here. How does increased energy efficiency influence overall energy consumption in both developed and developing economies? Are the rebound effects consistent across regions? There is a lot of written on that, and I've been reading a lot on this lately, and I don't remember the numbers. There are differences, but again, it still applies. And obviously, if you can make, but the trick is in developing countries, don't go with fossil fuels with efficient devices. Go with renewables. And the trick there is financing them. Again, it's the cheapest thing. As long as you can get them financed, you're going to save money. But in developing countries, they have a big problem raising money for renewables, where the fossil fuel guys are happy to come in there and build them some fossil fuel plant because they know they'll then be able to sell them fossil fuels forever. And they'll be dependent on them. So it's easy to get money. And the World Bank will give you money for that and all that kind of stuff. So that's why we have to change the policies. We have going to let one more question here. If we 1 second. Okay, iPhone von Ingo. Welcome? What's your question? Go ahead. You're still on mute. You should be able to unmute now. There you
No,
go.
I'm fine. Yeah, thanks, Dan. I have one question. Thinking about the subject, if we remember what happens with Bitcoin in the beginning phase of Bitcoin, everybody was predicting the amount of energy Bitcoin will use and the mining will use will grow very much. And this really didn't happen, didn't it? And the other point is the prediction of energy usage for AI that recommends that we have chips in these amounts to double, triple fold the chip production or computer production. Is this realistic that NVIDIA will do such kind of things in this short term period?
Well, two different questions. So the Bitcoin, my understanding is that was the prediction, and it would have been true if we had gone to adopt it as a currency rather than a specialized thing for basically criminals and things like that to use, and others. I mean, it's used for, bribes. It's untraceable, so it's easy to transfer money. So it's a kind of a niche still. It's still a niche currency as opposed to the currency everyone uses. So I think that's one reason it hasn't grown as much. A lot of those predictions were assuming it would keep catching on, and it kind of hit a limit. Let's see, what was the other one? What was the other question?
That if you really want to increase the power demand for compute, you need computers, you need chips, NVIDIA or whatever, and they need to double, triple fold their production.
They do.
Intel,
every
for instance,
18 months, they double. They double their processing power every 18 months. That's Moore's Law. Well, Moore's Law, I didn't even mention Moore's Law, but Moore's Law is very famous. It's the reason that graph I showed earlier, with every 6 years, the energy usage drops 90% per operation. It's because of Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is continuing. Everyone says, oh, we're going to hit the end of Moore's Law, but then something else happens and they find some other way around it. And in terms of manufacturing, we can make chips that are just made out of sand, and they're tiny things, right? We can make a lot of chips, and Apple just came out with their M4 chips, which are like way more powerful than their M3 chips. It's a step, and that's only like a year difference, right? Like 25% improvement in overall performance, something like that. And that's 1 year, and with less energy.
Yeah, performance-wise,
more energy efficiency.
Yeah, performance-wise, I'm with you, but with power consumption, I think
no, same thing. Same thing's happening.
No. A CPU, Intel Core or NVIDIA Core never participates more than 100 watts or something. They have thermal restrictions. And to build up factories for Intel or NVIDIA, it takes 2 or 3 years to really ramp up a new factory to build chips. So I don't take it that we will increase the power demand for this compute stuff so fast. That's my feeling.
Well, there is a limit. I mean, you can run into a roadblock where you just can't get enough servers or fans, or you can't get enough energy. So, yeah, so there's things that slow you down a little bit, but they're only temporary because you now have the economic pressure to get that energy. And so they ramp up renewable development or whatever it might be. But again, those renewables aren't going to eliminate fossil fuels, right? Again, I'm going to say one more time, energy efficiency is a good thing in general. It's just not something that reduces emissions. It just doesn't. So, but we are going to build more and more computers, and those computers are getting far more operations per chip, or per 100 watts, or whatever you want to say. You're doing every 6 years, you're doing 10 times more processing per watt every 6 years, with a little fluctuations along the way. So with that, we're now at 2:00, and I think that's a good time to end. Oh, unless Eric, are you still there and with another question? Or I see your hand is raised, but it might still be just raised from before. Okay. So Stacey, thank you. Eli, any final comments?
Actually,
Yeah.
I did want to make a couple of comments. So all of this is extrapolation from trends, and there are good reasons for doing that. But what we need to understand is that trends embody a number of assumptions, and if we can break the assumptions in those trends, we can have different, better trends.
Correct.
As a different example, if you look at what computation, just the dollar cost of a system was with vacuum tubes, and you give a rate of improvement, still today we wouldn't possibly be, or at least most people wouldn't possibly be able to afford an Intel 486 processor with 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is
no,
substantially
megabytes.
less
Megabytes.
than that's right, substantially less than any of our cell phones. But going back to AI, the benchmark gold standard, platinum standard would be the brain, which that is literally general intelligence, not artificial, but general intelligence, and it consumes 20 watts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it from that, and by the way, that's probably off by a factor of 1,000 from what would be possible with optimized device physics. But if you think about it from that perspective, and you say, well, let's say that energy costs 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is on the high side, and renewables can probably, already do a lot better, and probably do more than 10 times better, 20, 30 times better in the not distant future, right? If you think about that, $2 an hour for or excuse me, $20 an hour for the equivalent of 1,000 employees, right?
That's right.
So
that's why the numbers are so mind-boggling, by the way.
Yeah. So the point is, when that's the proposition, everybody will want to do that. So we have a situation where the appetite is relatively infinite, and
Correct.
it's only when it comes up against constraints, on the one hand, that people will deviate from pursuing that appetite. And there are a lot of ways of doing that. And Eric suggested one of them, which is saying, well, look, data centers have to be renewable powered. That's it.
But that doesn't actually solve it. That's my point, by the way.
Well, it doesn't.
It just means they suck up all the renewable energy. That's exactly what's happening right now.
Well,
this is not like some future idea. We're living through this at this exact moment.
But again, that embodies trends in the manufacturing of renewables, and what I'm implying maybe and should make explicit is that we can change those trends and break some of the assumptions there as well. And that's
what policy is all about. That's my point. Yeah, that we can do that. We're not, but we could. And I'm saying right now, the clean tech community, which thinks they're helping in their own personal way, like as an industry, they're trying to help the problem through investing in the right kind of solutions, are just because of the human brain is so easy to fool that even though they know it's true for all these other things, when it comes to the thing they want to invest in, that's some high energy efficiency thing like air conditioning or computing or whatever it is, they just can't believe that Jevons Paradox applies to them why doesn't it? If you were a business person trying to make your product cheaper, you would expect sales to grow. It just does. That's what everyone believes, but not when it comes to energy efficiency for purposes of reducing emissions. They just don't want to believe it. They want to ignore it. And I'm in the middle of a lot of these groups, and they do. And that's why I'm sort of, why am I bringing up Rebound Effect and Jevons? Everyone, you can see a lot of videos on Jevons, and everyone talks about it. But I don't think anyone's raising the alarm that it's being ignored to our detriment, that we think we're fixing a problem that we're not fixing at all. And that's, maybe I should end with that, because that's what I think is the kind of the key message here. And there's a lot of interesting links in the description about Rebound Effect, especially the one that's, I can't remember what it's called, but it says chapter 2 is on Rebound Effect. That's where I got that car picture from. It's really good. Really tells you a lot of the intricacies of it. It's not just the direct effects. The indirect effects are real. They are real, and they have a big impact, and we almost always ignore those. So anyway, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Eli. Thanks everyone else who asked a question. Not sure what the next week's is, but the week after that is about AMOC slowing down and the IPCC getting it wrong, which is really scary. And we're going to continue to cover AMOC because it's I think elevating itself to the #1 issue in climate change right now. Very near term, might already be happening. We don't even know. We won't know till after it's already triggered. But all the evidence showing likely by mid-century, devastation is unprecedented. And this part people don't really, again, believe, even though they hear it. It's irreversible. So once we go down that path, even though we're going to not like it, and we're going to say, I really wish we hadn't done all these things that caused it, it's kind of too late. So that's why it's important to really talk about it now.
Given the importance of that, I'd say either the week before or the week after, I keep saying this, I would love a show on war, declaring war on climate change, and what it would take to do that.
But the last presidential candidate for the party that supposedly is doing something about climate change not only didn't, and by the way, Biden couldn't declare an emergency right now. It's not doing it. She didn't even mention climate change in her campaign, except for really passing little short things. So it's just not, again, there's things you could do, but what I'd like to do is, if you have ideas on this, is how do you get that to happen?
That's
right?
That's what I'd
we
love
know
to
what to do.
about.
I'm very optimistic. People think I might be not optimistic. I'm very optimistic about what we can do about climate change, which is one of the reasons I also talk about SRM and CDR as being the plan B things you do when you don't do plan A, which is what you should have done for 40 years, and we're not doing it. So I'm very optimistic about what we could do. I'm not optimistic about what we will do, and the election just hammers that home. That it's not even that we're talking about it and deciding not to do it. We're not even talking. Here
we won't have
we
vaccines,
talk about
but
it.
maybe that's something that Kennedy can do. I don't know.
They say it's going to be a show and not a word before show that goes in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. Again, please like and subscribe and check out all our programs. There's a link at the very bottom of the video description that takes you to all our past interviews with all kinds of folks, upcoming shows, Jim Hansen, Bill McKibben, Gabriel Pontes, and others, and it's going to be really exciting. So keep tuned. And thanks everyone, and thanks Steve.